Hello, I'm Muriel, and I love true crime.
I'm Nick, and I am not a fan.
Thank you for joining us. Each week, I force Nick to listen to me tell him a story of a true crime. Welcome to Muriel's Murders. Today, we bring you the third and final installment of our Halloween series based on odd tales from the Brothers Grimm. Back in the 1800s, a couple of German brothers collected a bunch of German folklore as an act of cultural preservation and published it for the world to enjoy. Some of their greatest hits were gradually made more kid-friendly and are still told widely today. We're talking Cinderella, Snow White, Little Red Riding Hood, Hansel and Gretel, and Rapunzel, just to name a few. But while the original stories often featured kids, they weren't necessarily meant for kids. The stories were more about the intensely difficult conditions under which the people lived and the natural morals of Germans of a certain time. Many of the stories are thought to be thousands of years old, passed down through generations of storytelling over hundreds of cultures. So they're very universal stories. For our series, we didn't go with the greatest hits. We decided to retell some of the stranger, not safe for work stories.
Quit saying they're not safe for work. We made these for families. This is PG/PG-13 rated.
Yeah, families of children who are maybe not under 8. Okay, anyway, we used a 1987 translation of the complete fairy tales of the Brothers Grimm, translated by scholar Jack Zipes. I preserved the original dialogue from the stories, the structure and the plot points, but had some fun giving it the Muriel's Murders treatment. So we had a little playful fun with how we tell the story.
And by that, we mean Muriel just went off and wrote these in her own voice. And, what you're about to hear is absolutely the Muriel's Grimm.
Right. I'm trying to tell you about it. And it's for you, Nick, as always. I'm trying to tell you about it. But all of the plot points and the story structure are original. I didn't make those up. I just added in some sort of motivation behind the characters, or maybe what their internal monologue was, and then my perspective on why I thought it was funny. Nick added a bunch of completely insane sound effects and music. Mm-hmm. I have no idea how to rate these episodes for kids. There's no swearing and no adult relations, but there's lots of beheadings, stepmother crushings, corpse play, etc., etc.
General creepy scariness.
I think if you want to play it for your kid or listen to it with the family, just listen to it first. Don't take my word for it. I'm generally inappropriate. And with that, we bring you a story of corpses, ghosts, stupidity, and terror. Grimm Tale number 4, a tale about the boy who went forth to know what fear was. This story is about a single father and his 2 sons. The older son was really smart, super capable, all-around sensible guy. The younger son was extremely dumb. So the older son, he worked hard, taking care of stuff for the family, earning money, whatever he could do to keep everyone afloat. He's one of those guys, right? Mm-hmm. He'd do anything for his family. Anything except doing tasks at night, especially if it required walking through any particularly scary place, like a graveyard or something like that. It's way back in the day. There's lots of scary pockets of things.
That sounds like a very smart boundary to set for yourself.
He's a great dude, okay?
Okay.
And, when he was asked by his father to do something at night, he'd say, "Oh, no, father, I won't go there. It gives me the creeps." And this always confused the dumb son. The creeps? What what is this guy talking about? What on earth could the creeps be? And don't get me wrong, it's not like the dumb son was going to volunteer to take on any of the nighttime chores, but he just couldn't understand what the issue was.
That is a particularly hilarious version of being dumb, which is like not understanding fear.
You're picking up on a theme here, Nicholas.
Ooh. Oh, so I'm like the smart son right now.
So
saying things that make sense for the situation we're in.
So, right, the boy doesn't know what the big deal is. Like, what are the creeps? What's going on in this graveyard? And the same thing would happen when friends or family would tell scary stories around the fire. Everyone would be in the flickering light, just totally spooked, saying, "Oh, that gives me the creeps." And the dumb son would just sit there looking suspicious, right? They're always saying, "It gives me the creeps. It gives me the creeps." But it doesn't give me the creeps. It's probably some kind of trick that I don't understand. So one day, the father was just kind of staring at his dumb son, sitting in the living room, sort of staring off into space. And the father just had enough. He said, "Listen, you over in the corner, you're getting too big and strong. It's time you learned how to earn your living. Look at how hard your brother works. Well, you're just a hopeless case." And the boy insisted his father was wrong. He would love to broaden his horizons. He said, "Oh no, father, I'd gladly learn something." And then very seriously, he said, "If possible, I'd like to learn how to get the creeps. That is something I know nothing about." And the father's face was as stony as an Easter Island head. And after a few beats, the father decided to just let that one go.
He's like, "I don't know how to teach you to be scared. You either recognize that scary things can hurt you or haunt you or ruin your life, so therefore you're scared of them and want to stay away, or you just don't know that." That's sort of like saying, "I'd like to be taught how to be cold."
So soon after that father-son moment, the town sexton came for a visit, right? That's the guy who usually looks after the church and the graveyard and rings the church bell. So he's not like a priest, but he's godly, and he can be married and stuff.
Okay, but also haunted adjacent. If you're taking care of graveyards and ringing bells
No.
at night,
The sexton's like a guy, like just a.
He works for the church, I get it,
yardskeeper.
but he's also doing the scary things for the church.
Just one of them.
Okay.
So the father takes this opportunity, this visit from the sexton, to vent. His younger son is dumb. He doesn't want to do any work. He can't learn anything. His brain is a leaky sieve. You pour anything in, and it all comes out water and spaghetti. So the sexton is sitting there loving the gossip. And the bitter father goes on. And with all that, the one thing he's interested in learning is about getting the creeps. And the sexton leaned forward in a very conspiratorial way and says, "Hey man, if that's all he wants, send him over to my house and I'll give him the creeps."
Oh, no.
So maybe some red flags about that for some parents, but the father was totally on board. And so that day, the sexton left with the boy. So at the church, the sexton assigned the boy a single task: to ring the church bell. Every time it was time to ring the bell, the sexton would remind the boy, who would climb up the church steeple stairs and clang this bell. Now remember, he can't learn anything new, right? So his job is just to do it on the hour, but he can't really remember to do it on the hour. So the sexton has to kind of baby him through this task.
Got it.
And that went on for a few days, the reminding and climbing and clanging, until the sexton decided it was time to teach the boy about the creeps. At midnight, the sexton went to the boy's room and woke him up, reminding him to go ring the bell as always. But this time, The sexton slipped on a white robe and snuck up the steeple steps just ahead of the boy. When the boy reached the top of the stairs, the steeple was dark and empty except for the moonlight. The boy walked over to the bell and reached up to grab the rope and ring it when he saw a figure across the steeple standing in front of the stairs, staring straight at him.
Like a creepy ghost.
Right. "Who's there?" the boy called. The white figure didn't answer. He just stood, stone still. "Answer me or get out of here. You've no business being here at night." But the sexton, he didn't move an inch. He was feeling very sassy and proud, pretending to be a ghost. He was going to teach the dumb boy all about the creeps. The boy shouted again, "What do you want? If you're an honest man, say something, or I'll throw you down the stairs." The sexton committed to his ghost bit, even with the large boy coming straight towards him, thinking, this kid isn't going to push me down the stairs. So the boy walked around the sound hole and over to the sexton, who was still pretending to be a ghost. And without hesitation, the boy shoved the surprised sexton down the stone stairs, rang the bell, and went back to bed.
Oh, whoa. He really wasn't scared. He was like, he didn't even register that he was trying to be a ghost. He just thought he was a human in a robe.
You know?
So the dumb son is actually the smartest one of all.
Meanwhile, the sexton's I'm sorry. This is so fun for me because I don't know if people really understand. We're recording these separately from the intros, these stories. And so Nick doesn't know the title of this story. So you guys know, but Nick doesn't know. And it's just like my most delightful thing. Okay. So meanwhile, the sexton's wife is lying wide awake in her dark bedroom. Her husband should have been back to bed by now. The midnight bell had long clanged. She couldn't figure out what her husband was up to with that white robe thing. And frankly, the new dumb bell ringer that they had taken in was just giving her the creeps. Eventually, the sexton's wife crept out of bed and down the hall to shake the boy awake. "Do you know where my husband is?" she whispered. "He ran up the steeple ahead of you." "No," the boy replied sleepily, "but someone was standing across from the sound hole. When he refused to answer me or go away, I thought he was some sort of scoundrel and pushed him down the stairs. Why don't you go see if it was him? I'd feel sorry if it was."
Okay, well, he would feel sorry, but he is like, just go see if I just murdered your husband.
And with that, he rolled over and went back to sleep.
Oh, man, that is the gift of not being smart, is the ability to just sleep.
Untroubled. In a huff, she left the strange boy's room, hiked up her nightgown, and stalked across the dark churchyard on her sturdy legs. On the second stairwell in the steeple house, she found her husband, the sexton, dressed like a ghost, moaning with a broken leg.
So he survived. That's good.
She hoisted her husband onto her back, carried him out of the steeple, across the yard, and back to bed. Then she went barreling over to the boy's house and pounded on the front door. "Your boy has caused a terrible accident," she shouted. "He threw my husband down the stairs and made him break a leg. Get that good-for-nothing out of our house." The father was absolutely mortified. He hurried over to the sexton's house, just like cringing with shame through the town. You know, he gets there, he pulls the boy out of bed and drags him home. How? How could this happen? I knew he was dumb, but he broke the sexton's leg? Right? It was all too much. The father wanted this burden of a boy gone, out of his house. The boy, he took the news well. "All right, Father, gladly. Just give me until daylight, and I'll go away, and I'll learn how to get the creeps. Then I'll know a trick or two and be able to earn a living. The weary father said, learn what you want. It's all the same to me. Here's 50 tailors. Take them and go out into the wide world. But don't tell anyone where you come from or who your father is, because I'm ashamed of you. The boy agreed.
Yeah.
And he left his father's home at dawn, walking down the road, saying to himself, if only I could get the creeps. If only I could get the creeps. So this kid is walking down the road, just muttering to himself. And shortly, another traveler joins the road. And they didn't talk, but the traveler could hear the boy, like obviously muttering about the creeps and just being a general weirdo. And after a while, after several miles, the pair came up on some gallows. A group of executed men hanging from a large tree.
So that's very scary. That's horrifying and disturbing.
The man glanced at the strange muttering boy and cleared his throat. Then he said his first words to his traveling companion. You see that tree over there? That's where 7 men were wedded to the rope maker's daughter. Now they're learning how to fly. Sit down beneath the tree and wait till night comes. Then you'll certainly get the creeps. The boy was like, oh, thank God. Perfect. Thanks, man. And he promised the traveler if he could finally get the creeps that night, he'd give him all of his 50 tailors in the morning. And those are like gold coins or something.
Gotcha. That is a good way to get the creeps. And also to be scarred for life and to have genuine trauma.
And with that, the boy, he walked straight up to the gallows tree, sat beneath the hanging bodies, and waited for nightfall. After a while, it got chilly, so he built a fire. The boy noticed the wind was knocking the hanging bodies around like a wind chime and thought, gosh, if it's cold down here on the ground with a fire, he couldn't even imagine how cold the hanging men were knocking around like coconuts. So he took a ladder and untied each man one by one. He arranged the corpses by the fire, propped them up in a sitting position, and stoked the flames to get them really nice and warm. His companions were quiet, but polite. The fire grew and became hot, so hot that little embers jumped out and started to catch the raggedy clothes of the men. And the boy couldn't believe their carelessness. Even he knew if your clothes catch on fire, you should probably move back and stamp out the flames, idiots. Be careful, he scolded. Otherwise, I'll hang you all back up there. But the men remained silent, just sat there, rudely allowing their clothes to burn. When the men were all quite on fire, the boy had had enough. If you won't take care, I can't help you, and I surely won't let you burn me. And he hung them all up again and fell asleep next to the wind, knocking around their charred bodies.
So he is either really the dumbest person alive or an actual complete psychopath.
I love you. That morning, the traveler came back to the gallows to collect his money. Now, you know what the creeps are, he said, obviously. The boy replied, no. How should I know? Those men up there didn't open their mouths. They're so stupid, they let the few old rags they're wearing get burned.
I love how incredulous he is.
As the traveler studied the boy's vacant face, it slowly dawned on him that he would never get that money. And he just shrugged and walked away. The boy continued on his journey, muttering about how badly he wanted the creeps. But this is a busy road, and soon enough, another man, this time with a cart, came up behind the boy and heard his mutters. The cart man decided to engage, and the following conversation ensued. Who are you? I don't know. Where do you come from? I don't know. Who is your father? I'm not allowed to tell. Well, what's that you're mumbling to yourself? Finally, a good question. I want to get the creeps, but nobody can teach me how. The man with the cart was over it. He sighed a heavy sigh that reminded the boy of his father, and then wearily said, "Stop your foolish talk. Come along with me, and I'll see if I can get you a place to stay."
That did not work out well for the last guy who offered him a bed.
The cartman led the boy to an inn to spend the night. The boy entered the inn. He stood in the middle of the room and cried out, "If only I could get the creeps! Oh, if only I could get the creeps!" The innkeeper, who was always looking for trouble, laughed. "If that's what you want, you sure are in the right place." "Oh, be quiet," the innkeeper's wife said.
Everyone just wants to scare this kid.
He's a mark, man.
Well, scaring kids is fun, and here you have a kid just begging to be scared.
"Oh, be quiet," the innkeeper's wife said. "There have already been enough foolish fellows who've lost their lives. It would be a mighty shame if that boy with such pretty eyes never saw the light of day again." But this piqued the boy's interest, and he was adamant. For the first time, it looked like he was close to really getting the creeps. He bugged and begged the innkeeper until finally the innkeeper told him about the nearby haunted castle. So, the king of this area was kind of a weirdo, and he had promised to marry his daughter, who was arguably the most gorgeous girl on the planet, to anyone who could stay 3 nights in his haunted castle. The castle had a bunch of gold and jewels and stuff, but the catch was everything was guarded by murderous evil spirits who have killed literally everyone who had entered the castle. The boy stared blankly. None of that sounded like what he would call the creeps. But he'd take this innkeeper's word for it.
Okay.
The next day, this kid goes to the king and he asks for permission to stay in the haunted castle for 3 nights. And the king looked this kid over and thought, this kid looks earnest, maybe a little dull behind the eyes, but obviously determined. So he waved a kingly hand and granted the boy permission. The king had sent many men to death at his haunted castle, and he went over the standard procedures with the boy. The boy could bring 3 objects with him into the castle, which the king would provide.
Oh, so he can choose whatever 3 things he wants, and the king will give it to him.
Anything in the world that you think would, provide you protection.
Yeah, like a crossbow.
Anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
The boy chose a baffling mixture of practical and impractical items. Fire. Good. Great. Perfect. A lathe, which is a sort of machine used to sand down and carve out objects.
Okay, so that's a wild card choice.
And then a big, heavy carpenter's bench with clamps on it and like woodworking tools and a knife.
Okay, well, the knife part makes some sense.
It's a carpenter's knife.
Still, it's a blade, right?
Yeah. But also...
wise. He's like, well, I need to pass the time while all these evil spirits are around me. I might as well make some wood stuff. Is he good at making wood stuff? I thought he couldn't do anything.
Well, that's what everybody thinks. Those are the 3 objects he chose.
All right.
Mildly curious, the king watched the royal procession load the boy and his objects into the haunted castle. Afterwards, he returned to his throne. The castle was super cold, so the boy set up a big fire and stretched out on the stone floor in front of the fireplace. Soon, he heard some very loud cat noises. Big meows followed by complaining. "We're freezing," the cat noises screamed. "Well," said the boy, "if you idiots are so cold, why don't you come by the fire?"
Those are like haunted, scary cat Halloween screams. And he's like, just get over here then.
"Come on, dummies." So from the shadowy corners of the room, two big black cats leapt out, paced over, and sat beside the boy with mischief in their large eyes. So the energy is a little tense, but they all quietly warmed themselves until the cats broke the tension by proposing a game of cards. The boy was cool with playing cards. But before they started their card game, the boy decided that he'd like to see the cat's claws.
So that could be sensible or not. Does he?
I mean, all of this is kind of like, what? The cats and the cards? There's a lot going on here.
Okay. He wants to see the claws in case they're sharp and scary.
Right. So the cats look at each other and they kind of agree, right? Fine. I just want to play cards. Sure, whatever. Mm-hmm. So they take their little paws and stick them out and then release their claws. And the boy was shocked at the long, razor-sharp talons and decided, before I play any card game with you, I'm going to have to clip these down. So he grabbed the cats by the scruff of their neck, tossed them onto the carpenter's bench, and clamped their feet onto the bench with the carpenter's vices.
Oh, man.
But this wasn't about claws. The rusty gears of the boy's brain had begun to turn. Something inside him said, "These cats are trouble." "I was keeping a sharp eye on you two," he said. "And now, I've lost my desire to play cards." And with the cats incapacitated with carpenter's clamps, the boy simply beat them to death.
Come on. Not even a quick, merciful slitting of the throat?
That's not the story we have here. This guy is on his own level, right? Kind of reminds me of Hans the Hedgehog.
Yeah, I mean, the Brothers Grimms definitely work in patterns. They have themes, strong themes.
After the beating, the boy tried to return to the hearth next to his fire, but all of these black cats and dogs on glowing chains just came out of nowhere. He watched for a while as they stomped on his fire and tore the room apart. Finally, he couldn't stand it anymore. He screamed and leapt into the pile of cats and dogs with his carpenter knife, stabbing and slashing till most of the haunted animals were either dead or had ran away. He then dragged the big pile of dead animals out to a pond and dumped them in the water. After returning to the castle, he was cold, hungry, and exhausted from slicing and dicing. He built up the fire again and settled down on the stone floor for some shut-eye when he saw a bed in the corner. Busy night. So this was just what he was looking for. He peeled himself off the floor, crossed the great room, and snuggled into bed. And just as he drifted off to sleep, the bed started to move. And of course, should have guessed it, it's a magic bed.
It's a haunted bed.
Like a crazed spider, the bed raced up and down the hallways of the haunted castle, galloping at the pace of a team of wild horses. And, you guessed it, the boy had the time of his life. The bed ran all over the castle until it just got too tired. The bed returned to the great stone room, and finally, in a Hail Mary attempt to crush the boy, the bed crouched down, sprung up, and flipped over upside down.
Attack mode.
But the boy easily climbed out of the sheets and pillows. After that, he stood up, brushed himself off, and called out to the castle. "Now, anyone else who wants a ride can have one!"
All you evil spirits that are in here, you can take the bed for a ride.
He then returned to his spot on the floor by the fire and went to sleep. The next morning, the king entered the haunted castle with a flourish to find the boy lying on the ground. Assuming he was dead, the king said, "Ah, what a pity. He was such a handsome fellow." But when he heard this, the boy shot up like the exorcist and said, "It's not over yet," giving the king a mild heart palpitation.
And the creeps.
They chatted a bit. How did it go? Oh, fine. Beat some cats, stabbed some dogs. The other 2 nights should be easy peasy. There wasn't much to do after that, so the mildly surprised king headed home, wondering whether this strange boy would live through another night. Meanwhile, to kill off the rest of the day, the boy headed over back to the inn. The innkeeper's jaw hit the floor when the boy walked in. Surely, if anyone would have died on his first night in the haunted castle, it would be this kid. But instead of being pumped up on himself for surviving, the boy was just down in the dumps. He had spent that whole night in the haunted castle and still had no idea what the creeps were. Maybe he'd never learn. On the second night, the boy was sitting in front of his fire on his carpenter's bench, repeating his wish for the creeps, when he heard a loud banging around in the chimney. And then a half of a man tumbled out. The boy shouted, "Hey, there's half missing. This isn't enough." And
Did he really say that?
Yeah. I kept all the dialogue in this thing. And then the other half tumbled down the chimney as well. So the 2 halves of this crazy corpse body crawled around the floor and found each other blindly. And then they connected together to make a whole gruesome, monstrous man who promptly walked over and took the boy's seat. The boy was not having it, right? He came over, shoved the zombie off his bench, and sat down. He's like, "This is my seat."
Yeah.
But soon, he was vastly outnumbered. A horde of gruesome zombie halves tumbled down the chimney, one after the other.
That's the scariest thing that's happened so far in this whole story.
So the
That's
boy is
so scary.
He's sitting on this carpenter's bench watching this thing happen. They're falling into the fire, rolling out into the floor, crawling blindly around the floor trying to find their other half. And eventually, they're all assembled.
That's horrifying. That's legitimately scary.
After they assembled, they reached down and pulled out 9 human bones and 2 skulls. They set them up and began to bowl a game of 9 pins.
You mean they begin to go bowling
Yes.
with
And-
the skulls as the ball?
And they're not even paying attention to this boy. They're just doing their thing. So the boy's sitting there on his carpenter bench, and it's just like he has the hardest FOMO ever. The bowling looks so fun.
Yeah.
And finally, he kind of gathers himself together and he asks the monsters if he can play too. The monsters looked at him. This is a new request for them. This has not happened before.
This is supposed to be a normal day at the office for them. They fall down the chimney, they assemble, they start bowling with the skulls, and the guest gets so scared they run away.
Right, or die of fright, right? Mm-hmm. But, you know, it's a new thing. So they look at each other, shrug, and then one of them asks the boy if he's got any money. So the boy says, yeah, man, I got 50 tailors. But I'm going to say this. These skulls are not round enough for an actual competitive game of bowling.
I love how he just points out everyone's attempt to be scary as dumb. He's like, that logically doesn't make sense.
So the monsters were, agreed. They say, normally we just bowl for fun, but if we're going to bowl for money, okay, fine. You can grind down the skulls and make them more round. So the boy picks up the skulls, takes them over to his lathe, and then grinds them down until they're nice and round.
Okay, again, he's not dumb. He's truly a genius.
So the monsters and the boy, they bowled, they bet, they laughed and slapped each other on the back. The boy lost a little money, and everyone had a grand time. At midnight, everything disappeared in a puff of smoke. And the kid went to sleep on the floor in front of the fire, happy to have played with some new friends.
Just an absolutely successful monster mash.
The next morning, the king made his kingly entrance. The boy popped up, and the king asked the boy how his night was. And he replied, "Oh, fine. I played a game of 9 pins and lost a little money." Not sure what to say to that odd answer. The king replied, "Well, didn't you get the creeps?" And the boy said, frustrated, "Not at all. I had a lot of fun. If only I knew what the creeps were." On the third night, the boy was despondent. He had one more chance to get the creeps, but he just didn't see it happening. When night fell, 6 huge men entered the room, carrying a coffin in the shadows. The boy saw them and jumped up. "Aha! That must be my cousin who died just a few days ago. Come here, little cousin, come in here."
Oh my God.
The large men just kept doing their thing. They set down the coffin and opened the lid, and the boy ran over excited and was shocked to find his cousin was cold to the touch. The boy dragged the stiff corpse over to his fire. He sat it in his lap and rubbed its arms, trying to wake it up.
I want everyone to know that Muriel literally started rubbing her arms. That's how into the story she is.
When that didn't work, from the dark cobwebs of the boy's mind, he remembered something. He remembered that you could warm someone up by lying in bed with them. So he dragged his cousin's body into the great big, magical bed that had run around a couple nights earlier.
Yeah.
So there are the 2 cousins, the very much alive boy, and the very cold corpse of the little cousin. Mm-hmm. So he's rubbing this cousin's arms, trying to warm him up so they can, hang out, talk, catch up, whatever.
Right.
Eventually, the corpse began to twitch. And then it began to move around. And the boy was delighted. "You see, cousin? What if I hadn't warned you?" And the corpse shouted back, "Now I'm going to strangle you." The boy was shocked. He said, "What? Is that my thanks? I'm going to put you right back in that coffin." He dragged the corpse over, tossed it back in the coffin, and the 6 great men picked it up and carried it out of the room. The boy sat back down on his bench to mourn his inability to get the creeps once more, but he didn't have long. This was the 3rd night, and things were about to get real. A giant old man with a long white beard entered the room, the final boss. So the giant bearded man says something like, "You want to know what the creeps are, punk? I'll give you the creeps, and then I'll kill you." But instead of finally giving the boy the creeps, the giant old man got sucked into an argument with the boy about who was the strongest. It just kind of degenerated into nothingness, right?
Yeah, I mean, this boy has this genius ability just to demand that people operate on his terms.
So this argument postponed the creep session, and they decided to hold an anvil beating contest instead.
A what?
Anvil beating contest, like a stone or a metal anvil.
Yeah, like the things that they drop in the Bugs Bunny cartoons.
Right.
They're going to beat them.
Yeah, just to see who's stronger.
Okay, good.
So while they're wailing on these anvils, the boys somehow sledgehammered the man's long white beard into an anvil and trapped him.
Whoa, he's good at trapping people.
Mm-hmm. Then the boy beat the old man until he cried and then admitted defeat. At this point, the old man, beaten and broken, led the boy to his treasure. The odd couple made their way down sets of stairs and long dark hallways into the cellar of the castle. There, the old man gave him 3 chests full of gold that he'd been hiding. The spirit told the boy 1 of the chests belonged to the poor, 1 to the king, and 1 to the boy. The clock struck midnight, and the old man disappeared. So the boy was stuck in the pitch black cellar with 3 chests of gold. So he spent the rest of the night crawling on his hands and knees through the dark castle, blindly feeling his way through the darkness until he finally found his room. He walked up to his nice warm fire, curled up, and fell asleep. The next morning, the king entered the haunted castle, all jazzed up to see the boy alive and well. "Now, you must have learned what the creeps are," he boomed. The boy replied, "No. What are they? My dead cousin was here, and a bearded man came. He showed me a great deal of money down in the cellar, but nobody told me what the creeps are." The king was like, "Oh my God, whatever. Fine. You saved the castle, and now you shall marry my daughter." So he had his guys go bring up the gold, distribute it. Everyone had a fun wedding. The boy was in love with his new wife. It was all good.
Yeah, he's rich now.
Yeah. Except the whole time, during the wedding feast, during the wedding dances, during the, formal introductions, the speeches, the teary eyes, the boy was like a broken record. He just repeated over and over again, "If only I could get the creeps. If only I could get the creeps." So a few days go by, and after her wedding and this time with her new prince, the princess was totally irritated. Every day, nonstop, "He's so dumb. Please God, it's like nails on a chalkboard." Finally, the princess's chambermaid, who was totally down for whatever, was like, "Look, he wants to know what the creeps are. I'm about to show him what the creeps are." In the middle of the night, the chambermaid walked cold and calculated as an assassin out to a little pond in the castle garden and filled a bucket with freezing cold water and tiny little minnows. She lugged the bucket up the stairs to the royal chamber in the moonlight. There, the princess was waiting. The princess flung back the blankets, and the chambermaid dumped the slimy, flapping fish all over the boy's body. He screamed and screamed, "I've got the creeps! I've got the creeps! Now, dear wife, I know what the creeps are!" And the princess rolled her eyes and went back to bed. The end. That's it. It's the longest dad joke in history.
How is that a dad joke?
I don't know.
I don't think it's a dad joke.
I just love the idea of this story being told for thousands of years. And they're like, wait for it. My mom used to tell this joke or this story to us when I was a kid. Her mom used to tell it to her. And basically you are the mom or the parent and you tell like a really long story. It's really like a scary story, right? And at the end, there's a chant you can do to basically ward away the bad spirits. So you tell this big long story and then you have your kids chant back this chant to ward off the bad spirits so they won't be afraid.
Oh.
And I'll tell you what it is. Okay, so you say, Owa.
Owa.
Tagu.
Tagu.
Siam.
Siam.
And then you just say it over and over again.
Owa Tagu Siam. Owa Tagu Siam. Owa Tagu Siam. Like that?
Well, if you're a little kid, you might realize that you're saying, oh, what a goose I am. Because you fell for it.
Did I just fall for it? Did it sound like that's what I said?
It did.
Oh, what a goose I am.
My mom was like, you should tell that story.
You're like, no, Mom. I've got this one about the creeps.
But I had a feeling I might be able to trick you with that one. And it worked. So that's really satisfying.
Thank you so much for listening. If you have a loved one in your life who might enjoy these Muriel's Grimm episodes, please play it for them, text it to them, post about these episodes online, or share them in whatever way feels best for you. Thank you very much for sharing the love. This episode was written and performed by Muriel Montgomery, and all the recording, editing, and sound effects were engineered by me, Nick Castellini. It was recorded in our living room, and all the music was royalty-free. Thank you to all the amazing musicians.
If you're new to our podcast or a longtime listener and you enjoyed these Muriel's Grimm episodes, please let us know. If these are a hit with you or the kids in your life, we would love to hear from you.
Our contact information is in the show notes of this episode. Our regular scheduled true crime programming will be back to normal next week.
Thank you. Sweet dreams and good night.